Congratulate you guys. I know I didn't get all of the homework in here because I got a feeling there's some other homework done here in this room that we didn't get a chance to get to. So I think we're running a little late today because of the change of meeting arena. But certainly I want to stay afterward and make myself available. We're going to try to end on do a little bit more of this processing of the homework after we just touch on a little of this. And then those of you who've done some homework, I'd like for you to see me, the ones that we got to today, because I want to push you deeper into your practice. You're getting very close and you're going in the right direction. Just want to give you some pointers, some tips, point my finger at some things you should look at, and hopefully next week you'll come back with even more ahas than this week, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about managing your anger at your kids. Again, I'm not going to exhaust this topic because we're going to just kind of move around with this thing. Now, I'm feeling that you all have a firm enough foundation where I can just kind of skip a little here, skip a little there, because I don't have to go back and lay any foundations. If there's anything that has gone on before that gets a little tricky as we move further along, just afterwards see me and I'll try to clarify it for you. But certainly there are some key relationships that we must manage our anger. I mean, there's no issue about that because it goes directly to the quality of that relationship. Now, everybody in here who have children, my assumption is that you want a quality, healthy relationship with that child. So we have to talk about parent-child relationship. And isn't it ironic that in every family system you'll find that there were certain parents that you just had a more quality relationship with than perhaps the other parent? Interesting, right? And when you look at those relationships, you always will find that that parent that you probably have the better of the relationship with was that parent that gave you a little deeper sense of being of value and of worth, isn't it? Right? So if that holds true for you, then definitely it holds true for your children. Nothing destroys your child's sense of worth and value in your eyes than when you unload your rage and anger onto that child. You have to remember that one of the techniques that we unfortunately use for managing our own anger, particularly when we are managing it inappropriately, is that we displace, don't we? Remember we talked earlier about the fact that displaced anger syndrome, right? Now, very often our children and other loved ones are the victims of our displaced anger. And that displaced anger can be overt or covert. The damage is just the same. Remember, when you're talking about, well, this job is building so much stress on me, I'm so frustrated this, I'm so frustrated that, well, that's fine, those are just words, but how is that energy is moving? You see, where does that energy go to? Where is that anger being deposited, right? How is it a consequence in your relationship? And very often, after that hard day at work, you know, the parent go to work, they work hard all day, the boss has just treated you like you don't count and all this other stuff, or whatever the situation may be, and you come home and here I'm just saying parents or parents, it doesn't matter. Very often it is these children of ours that catches the brunt of this displacement. So we have to be very careful. You have to remember that you now are doing to your children what was done to you. Now, you can break this cycle of ignorance, or you can repeat it and thereby ruin another generation. Because they're forming their images of themselves now, right? They're collecting their early recollections now. And you are the major player in those recollections. Remember I said that as parents, particularly mother, but that doesn't mean that the father don't have influence. Please, I didn't want to give you that impression. I'm simply saying that the mother is the first contact with that child, and therefore the first psychological bonds, emotional bonds, the first training in the need of meeting the test that's going to confront that child begins with the mother. It was not to minimize the father, of course, at all. But we have to understand that these children are not just our biological and physical reflections. I mean, they don't just carry our common genes and blood. They are your emotional and psychological and very often spiritual reflections as well. So you want to bear that in mind as we talk about this subject here. So we can see then that a lot of our own anger that is being mismanaged is displaced across our children, thereby destroying for them a chance at ever developing any self-respect. And so we have to be conscious of that. Because you're going to get angry at your children. Remember I said before on many occasions that there is no such thing as conflict-free relationships. Has never been, will never be. It's not possible. Conflict is inevitable. The problem is not even the inevitability of conflict. The problem is the inability to resolve conflicts. Most of us, remember I pointed out to you, are emotionally illiterate. We have no concept or ability whatsoever to manage our own emotional reactions to events, circumstances, and particularly it doesn't make us worthless at all. It simply means we're emotionally illiterate. And we have to become literate. And the way to become literate, of course, is by doing homework. So let's take a look and see now how we normally manage our anger at our children. What do you normally do?
Whoop 'em.
Whoop 'em. That's right. That whooping very often is your so-called good intention, isn't it? That is the most popular form of good intention on the planet. You whoop 'em. I'm whooping you, beating you, you're bleeding because this is in your best interest. And then they're like, oh, I feel good. You see, you were getting your own self some relief because you couldn't whoop the boss. You can't whoop your husband, you can't whoop the wife. You know, you can whoop this kid, right? And if you don't whoop them physically, you whoop them with your mouth. Dangerous. You make fun of them. I remember as a kid growing up being made fun of. And I can still feel the wounds across my psyche. So you don't forget those kind of things. And particularly when you've been made fun of by your parents. You see? It is a very painful experience. So sometimes in our signifying, you know, black people like to signify a lot.
Yeah, they do.
Is that right? Well, let me tell you why. Because signifying was one of our cultural ways of managing our anger. When you signify it on a person, if you're good now, you can tear that person up. You can hurt. I remember growing up and developing somewhat of a reputation as being a master signifier, even then, right? And I'll never forget the power of words and their ability to hurt. And it was a friend of ours growing up with us, and I don't think I'll call his name because I don't know where these videos will wind up. Right? But in any case, I remember one day signifying on this boy, you know, and I was tearing him up. And the way I discovered that the signifying is more powerful when it's rooted in the truth. You understand? When it's got some truth underlying it. And he had a drunken uncle that I knew he was ashamed of. In fact, the whole family was ashamed of this drunken uncle, right? His name was June, right? And I caught this boy one day, right? And I just tore him up through his uncle. And I did some tall signifying on that family. You know what I mean? I just messed him up. And I remember this boy crying. Now we're about 12 or 13, right? And he just broke down in tears, you know, because it hurted him so much. Very often we signify it on a person as an act of revenge. Did we not? You done did something to me, I'm angry at you. And I'm going to signify on you, I'm going to tear you up. You see? So it was a way, you see, of very often mismanaging our anger. And so we signify even now on our children. So, we signify. And sometimes it boomerangs because it doesn't come off as humor. Humor is different, you know, to make fun, so to speak, with someone is a very different thing. Humor does not hurt. Humor does not produce tears. Humor will not lead to a fist fight. Have you ever noticed that? You go too far to signify, and this person ready to get you now. Because it was never funny. It was never even intended to be funny. Your whole idea was you were hitting this person without your hands. You see, it's a form of mental violence, emotional violence. And sometimes that person will, if they don't have the skill to fight back mentally and emotionally with you, you may be more articulate, more clever, more witty. You see, they can't compete. Then they're ready to kick your butt. And I had to run from a lot of people growing up. All right? And so the point I'm making is that we have built into our culture a lot of things that has grown out of our failure to manage our anger at our children appropriately, as well as many other people that we come in contact with. So this good intention of whooping is one of the classic ways that we mismanage our anger at our children. Am I saying that we mustn't discipline our children? No, not at all. I said from the beginning that children very often in the early developmental stages must be trained just like an animal. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I simply mean that they don't have all that intellect open, first of all. So there's nobody to discourse to. There's no one to lecture to. Okay? That's not available. So you have to use the pain and pleasure principles, right? Punish and reward systems and modeling behavior. And modeling behavior. Sometimes when they're very young, you can't even use the reward and punishment system. You just got to immediately associate an act that is a threat to that child's well-being with pain. It's like what we call neuro-associative conditioning. It's a very basic thing. You know, if the child is about to reach in a fire and gonna burn himself up, you got to put some pain on that child to make them associate that act, and then they will withdraw, not from the fire. They're withdrawing from the pain that they associated with the fire that is coming as a result of your smacking their hands, or whatever the case is. But when the child is 16 years old, who are you trying to whoop? Now they have an intellect open. Now you can move at a higher level. Seth Rod plans on whooping his children until they're 21. He confessed. He said there's never going to be a time he won't knock us all out. Is that true, Seth?
Never too grown.
Never too grown. Our parents tell you, you ain't never too grown. I knock you, I brought you in here, I'll take you out of here. Now the man is 80 years old. He can barely breathe. Who is he gonna take himself out, trying to take me out? But that is the mindset, right? There is a time when the children are past whooping. If whooping becomes counterproductive. It becomes counterproductive. It is very relevant in the remote stages of the child development, when there is no other methodology available to you to shape behavior. Remember, parenting is an institution. It is an institution. And like most institutions in the society, it has one function. It is to shape behavior. Please make a note. Parenting is a behavior shaping process. The behavior of the child is being cultivated so that that child can now fit into the needs of the larger community. They can become harmonious with a community. They can fall into the ma'at. You understand? And if you fail to shape the behavior to a degree, where they have the capacity to interact harmoniously and cooperatively with the community, then that child is usually ostracized and not allowed to be a part of the community. So it's rooted in something very basic. So parenting is an institution that has as its aim and objective the harmonious development of a child, which necessarily involves the shaping of behavior. You take in something rough, wow, no different than any other animal, and you're turning it into a human being. That's a magnificent challenge. It's a magnificent thing, you see. And those who are successful at doing that, turning this animal into a human being, are worthy of our greatest respect and admiration. I mean, you may find other things in our culture that is held to be wonders of the world, the Great Pyramids, you see, or a tremendous piece of art, or a particularly soul-stirring song, or some absolutely intoxicating lines of poetry. There are many things that we will encounter that is worthy of our awe and our admiration. But I tell you that all of those things pales into insignificance in comparison to the encounter of a human being. It is a tremendous thing. And we owe that to the parents that were in charge of that process. Because you have to understand, if you're not going to live your life on the useless side, we talked about that. If you're going to live life on the level of contribution, the greatest thing that you have to contribute to the world, to mankind, to humankind, to womankind, is your children. Please make a note of that. Please make a note of that. You have to change your gestalt. As parents, our objective is to give the world a first-class human being. God, isn't that magnificent if I could give the world a Buddha, or a Mahavir, or a Jesus, or a Muhammad, or a Patao Tep? What can be greater than that? What greater work of art is that? But look and see, what are you contributing to the world via your children? Are you giving the world a monster? Are you giving the world one of them pampered children that will raise hell all over the world? Everybody that they come in contact with, they will simply cause them nothing but sheer misery. And why? Because you pampered the kid. You totally failed to prepare that child to act in a harmonious relationship to the community. You turned them into a crown prince, whereas now they have become parasitical. They are leeches. They want everything laid at their feet. They are useless. And like your parenting was useless, you produce children on the useless side of life. Try to understand this. If you as a parent are parenting on the useless side yourself, you will produce children that are useless. They have no value at all from a community perspective. Doesn't mean they don't have worth as a human being. I don't want you to get confused here about this. I have to remind you again and again, even if they're useless, they got worth, they're useless. That's a functional thing. It's not an essence thing, it's a functional thing. You see, it's like that air conditioner. If it doesn't work, it is useless. It's still intact, right? But it's useless for contributing anything to our comfort. So it is with your children. So our task then is to how to somehow, as best we can. Will we get it perfect? Absolutely not. Make no mistake about it. We just need to get it good. There's a few things that we have to know, and a few things we have to understand. A few traps that we have to avoid falling into. Now, I mentioned to you about good intentions simply being our own selfish desire disguised, right, in the form of a benefit for someone else, our victim. And it's as ludicrous as the whooping. You beating this kid to death for your benefit. Or you're not whooping them for their benefit. It's the same trick. I'm not going to whoop them for your benefit. Nonsense. There are times when a good ass whooping is appropriate. But if you're so busy trying to be your child's friend, if you're so caught up in that, you think the world is not going to whoop them? For sure. world is going to deal some serious work. So you have to begin to understand this thing is a great science, this is a great art. You're going to have to meditate on this. We went to City Hall, right? Paid a few dollars, took the blood test, you know, did the biology portion of the assignment, right? And presto, we now feel we're fit to be parents. No preparation. Not even no thinking about it. We think it just comes natural. Nonsense. This is work. This is sadhana. This is what it's all about. You have to understand, folks, that the purpose of attaining spiritual progress is not to disappear into nirvana or into some etheric region remote from mankind. No one who has attained any authentic spiritual development has ever done that. The stage for the use of your spirituality is in the world. It is with your family. It is with your children. It is with your siblings, your brothers, your co-workers, your employees. The stage for a Buddha is here. Right? It's not this escapism. Right? Because by interacting out of your spirituality first with your children, you're in a position to make maximum contribution. The contribution of a Buddha was not the body of his Pali text in the Dada. The contribution of a Buddha was Rahul, his son, who became a Buddha and set on the Gati after his father. That was the greatest contribution that Buddha gave to mankind, was the son of his father. You see? And so on and so forth. So I want us to have the appropriate spirit as we look at these things. Now these good intentions, and as they relate to parenting, manifest in four fundamental classic styles. If there's dysfunctional people, you find dysfunctional children, look behind it, I guarantee you will find some dysfunctional styles of parenting. Do that make sense to you? Dysfunctional styles of parenting produce dysfunctional children. And the dysfunctional style is not always as exaggerated and dramatic as what you might read about in the paper somewhere, where parent throws child out of the window. You know that's dysfunctional. Parent burns child in a bathtub of hot water. You know that's a dysfunctional parent using a dysfunctional style, and they're going to mess this kid up. Those are glaring. Most of the dysfunctional styles of parenting are so subtle, you don't even know it. Many of us are dysfunctional parents, and you don't even know it. And that's what makes it so dangerous. In order for us to continually function from that point, we have to have the feeling that there's nothing wrong with the way we parent. Because if the awareness became up and you were aware, now it's going to be difficult, right? And you have to start suppressing intelligence and all that other stuff to continue to engage in that kind of style. The first dysfunctional style of parenting. Remember, this is a good intention. It is an act that we do in the behalf of our own children that is for their benefit. It's in the category of whooping. It's for you, baby. Daddy loves you, right? Over protection. Overprotective of our children. And we want to look at each of these and examine and trace out of these parenting styles the dysfunctional impact that it will have on the child. Because it's almost crystal clear. And remember, it's overprotective. We all have to be protective of our children to some extent, don't we? It's normal. What makes these styles dysfunctional is that they are on the extremes. Whenever you go over or under, whenever you hit one or the other, you're going to dysfunction your child. You got to follow that middle course. Right in the middle. That's where my heart is at. My heart is in the middle, isn't it? Right? Harmony, balance is always in the middle. It's only by getting in the middle that you can, in fact, come into my heart. There is no other way. You can't produce a harmonious human being on this extreme. And you certainly can't produce a harmonious human being on the other extreme. So we're looking at the overside of the dysfunctional style, okay? And you just take the corollary and you'll see the same impact on the underside, okay? So overprotective. We want to spare that child all suffering in life. Is this possible?
No.
Huh? Is it possible to protect your child from every threat and suffering in life? Or would it make more sense to prepare that child to have the strength and the courage, the wherewithal to deal with life's sorrows, to deal with life pains that are inevitably coming his and her way, right? But when we ourselves are practicing an overprotective style of parenting, what we do is we deprive that child of their own ability to adapt to the reality of life, because they never get a chance to use those skills and faculties. They atrophy, don't they? And what do we look to find in this child now over a period of 4 or 5 years? Because that's all it's going to take. About that 5th year, you pretty much done. Oh, that's it. That's it. 5 years of this here, and here's the kind of damage you would have created in this person that will plague them their whole life. What would you expect to find in a child who has been overprotected? What inadequacies do you expect to find in that child, psychologically, emotionally?
Shelter.
Well, yeah, he's been sheltered, but how will that look psychologically?
Fear. Failure to be able to make decisions.
Can't make no decisions, right? No decision. Okay, so indecisive. Indecisive simply because they never been allowed to even get into a situation where they had to use their mind. You made up all their minds. Wear this here today, comb your hair like this, put this on, put that on, put this on, put that on, put that on, put this on, put this on. And now the kid don't know what I should wear. And they're 35 and then they call you, Mama, what should I buy? Come go with me to the mall. I need to pick out a dress. Because they're 35 years old and they still don't know how to pick out their dress. They still can't decide. Mama, who should I marry? You know, you mean you out of touch with your own love? You can't even tell who you love anymore. You got to go ask Mama, do I love him? It's almost going to ask, am I hungry? Right? Am I awake? Am I thirsty? You become alienated, right? What are some of the other things that we'll find? And remember, Sandra is going to give us one more. Now remember the key to this, remember the 5 tasks of life that we got to prepare this child for. The task of earning a livelihood, right? We got to prepare this child for the task of love and marriage, right? We got to provide them for the task and the challenge of learning how to cooperate with others in the world, right? We got to prepare this child for the task of developing and hanging on to their own self-respect. And certainly we got to give them some skills and training, religious or spiritual, and dealing with their own mortality. These are the tasks that confronts all of us as we emerge into the adult world. And the whole function of parenting is to provide our children with some training in that respect. And when we overprotect that child, we take away from them some vital training in one of these areas. Now, Sadraj, you had to come in as far as the
fear to face life.
Yeah, fear. These kids become fear. They very often become paranoid. Don't go over on that block because they're going to kill you over there. Don't go on the front porch. You're going to get a drive-by bullet. Get out of that window. It's raining outside. Lightning bolt going to hit you. Pull the shades down. Sit. Be quiet. Don't move. It's drizzling outside. All kinds of crazy stuff, right? I mean, we do that. And some of that was done to us, right? And now in our adult intelligence, we can look back and say, Mama just scared the hell out of me. She scared me for nothing. Just had me terrified, scared to move, you know what I mean? And some children never get out of this. It strikes lightning, they're 45, and they are pulling that, they are plugging everything in the house. Aren't they? Now they got a PhD in physics. They know it don't work like that. But that PhD in physics does not override that old, my mama said, So very often we become fearful, we become paranoid, because again, we are not adapted. What you will notice about all of these dysfunctional styles of parenting is that it fails to train us as children to be able to adapt. They're maladaptive, aren't they? All of these styles. But a couple other things. We won't exhaust them, but I want you to look at these, especially if you're a parent. Look at this stuff.
They become so self-centered until they don't cooperate with others.
They don't ever develop the ability to cooperate. They can't, because you don't protect them out of the possibility of developing that skill.
Uncooperative.
Yeah, uncooperative. Right.
And they stay self-centered, like you said. A small child
They are
is
isolated.
self-centered. Isolated. Oh, okay.
They become isolated. Isolated. You don't protect them out of all friendship. They don't have no friends.
Yeah.
And they stay in that kitchen behind you until they're 39. Right? That's following you around the house. Then you complain now.
Yeah.
You got a 39-year-old man still asking you for bus fare. Right? You have so overprotected that man from the realities of adult life. You have so dysfunctioned them that you have not trained them to be able to adapt to that reality at all. They are so emotionally and psychologically undeveloped. They can't get a job. They can't get a woman. They will fail across the entire task of life. And it's ugly. And that you're trying to give to the world is your legacy. Keep, please. We don't keep them in the kitchen with you. Right? White House. That's right. Don't turn them loose on us. Now, suppose you marry something like that, you're in trouble. Right? All right, so we won't exhaust these, but I want you to look at all of these. Okay? I'm just kind of going through them kind of briefly now. We'll come back perhaps a little later to them. Because each of these merit a whole straight workshop on itself. It really do. It's that much material. I'm giving you the atoms. You know, this is all condensed. You know, you got to put it in your mind and let it dissolve like a pill in water, and then drink it fully, and it heals you. Because believe me, you're going to see yourself up here. All right? The next one is overindulgent. Overindulgent. You give them everything they want. Before the kids can get, I need a new pair of gym shoes out his mouth, he's got 5 pairs of gym shoes. Right? They got VCRs, they got, you name it, electronic store in the room. You've given them every material thing you can imagine. And out of a good intention, isn't it? Because what? You don't want your children to want for nothing like you do. We have to walk to school with them shoes, with the cardboard in them. We didn't have bus fare, and we didn't have that. And so naturally, we conclude from that that in spite of that, I still finished college. But God, if I had had a quarter to ride the bus and shoes without holes and this and that, I might have could have got a PhD. Well, you see, we jump to that kind of conclusion. And we fail to realize that with them holes in the shoe and no bus fare, we got a degree. So we're figuring now with this twisted logic, therefore, if I gave my child a car, not just a bus fare, I'm going to give this kid a car to go back to school, he'll be able to get a PhD. Do it work out like that? No. You overindulge the child. And after 4 or 5 years, on a daily basis, 10, 12, 15 hours a day, you keep programming this child's attitude toward life along the lines of how you are interacting with them, that everything's going to fall at your feet, the world is going to give you what you want. Now, what are we setting this child up for? What do you expect to see in this child now?
Lazy.
Lazy. Big time. Big time. This is all of these are pampered children. Remember I talked to you about that? Pampered children. And remember I talked to you about birth order. I told you that the eldest child, the only child, and the last child are the 3 positions in a family system, or the 3 relationships in a family system that are most likely to lead to a pampered condition. And I've already told you that, and the majority of the children with problems are pampered children. These pampered children grow up to be killers, criminals, murderers, drug addicts, all kinds of things. They become useless. They fall on the useless side of civilization. And it all starts here, right? With some parenting. So that child will become lazy. What else you expect to see manifest in the personality and the psychology of these overindulged, pampered children?
They don't really trust their own ability when they're expecting. They're always expecting something like others.
Yeah, they always, they look at, they're selfish, right? They always want to see what they can get out of a situation. Because what's in it for me? That's the only way they can think, because they're on the useless side of life. They can't think, what can I contribute to this situation? That's not possible for them. They're going to think, what's in it for me? How much money are you going to give me? Are you going to reward? What are you going to give me if I take out the garbage? How much dough? How much this? What's in it for me? Right? What other characteristics? Immediate gratification. They won't have any ability to have any patience, will they? Right? They are very impatient. They want it right now. And very often they will jump up and down and cry until you get it. Right? I want it now. Stores closed. Kid will cry all night long. They throw tantrums. They'll hurt themselves, but they hit against the walls. Anything. You see, they have no patience. And guess what? When they enter into the adult world, into reality, are they in for some trouble? They in for some big trouble. They will fail at all tasks in life that requires any patience because they can't delay gratification. You see, they can't delay gratification. That is almost a sign of emotional immaturity in anybody, the extent to which they can delay gratification. It's a classic characteristic of a child's mentality. What are some of the other things that you would expect to find in this child who has been a victim of their parents' good intention? Remember, it's a good intention. What did I say about good intentions? It is always selfish. It is always counterproductive. And it's always self-defeating. Always. This overindulged child will grow up and break your heart. And you would have that feeling. I did all of this good for this kid. Gave him all of that stuff. Gave him everything he wanted. I did all this good for nothing. And you start feeling good for nothing. You yourself enter into the good for nothing. Give me one more. I know it's exhaustive. It's not exhaustive, but it's enough to get us some insight into it. Who has another insight?
Independent.
Oh, thank you. I don't even like the word they become parasitical almost.
Yeah, they do.
They become very dependent. They become helpless. They can't do nothing for themselves at all. Do this, do that, do this. That's characterizing. Help me tie my shoe. Would you tie my shoe? You see grown men still asking their mom to tie my shoe. I mean, it's still the kindergarten stuff. It's just disguised. It's the same deficiency when they asked the mother for $1 for bus fare, they're 39. It's the same deficiency that they were working out when they were asking her to tie a shoe. Mama, give me $1. I got a cousin. I mean, you probably do too. But I know they're real people. And the man is 45. How old is he? 40. You know, in the family, we know what we're talking about, right? He's 45 years old. And mama still got to fix his breakfast, fix him food, give him $1. You know, totally, it's messed up. It's dangerous. And as you look through here, see your parenting style and also see the style out of which you are parent, because guess what? Your style is most likely to be the style with which you were the style with which you live. Well, our parents perfect? Of course not. We love them? Of course we love them. Of course. It's not an issue. But they were not perfect human beings. And it's only rational to conclude, therefore, that some of that imperfection got intermingled in their styles of parenting and came out in the form of our own psychological and emotional development. Our task, as Emma pointed out to us, is to become aware and edit. That's it. They put some good stuff in us, did they not?
Oh, yeah.
Of course. They were successful to the extent that you're still on this planet. If they were really failures, you wouldn't be alive. Somebody had to bring you through those stages where you can do nothing for yourself. So let us not mock our parents. You see, we're simply trying to understand this. This is not about mocking. You see. So they got some things very right. Overindulgent, explore it, look at it. Look at all the things that we can wind up doing to our children as a result of that style that makes them totally unprepared to deal with the reality and the task of adult life. This is a big one. Overcritical. Another big one. Overcritical. Where you just find something wrong with everything the kid do, you find something wrong with them. That child starts feeling that they are never good enough to satisfy you. This feeling of not being good enough, this absence of a sense of enoughness, is what we call self-contempt, right? Self-contempt, of course, is the opposite of self-respect. When we're overcritical of the child, we are actually destroying that child's any respect and value that they had from womb. But after 4 or 5 years of this stuff here, we have destroyed this child's whole foundation of what even ever having an experience of self-respect. Because no matter what your accomplishments outside, all the praises you get from the bosses, it is those parents and them siblings. You need to hear mama say, baby, that's good, even today. And when mama or sibling or somebody said, you failed, even if you done conquered the world, if you done an Alexander the Great number, and mama says, you know, something that, again, invalidates your value and worth as a human being, you're crestfallen. It's powerful stuff, folks. And through this overcritical style of parenting, we very often destroy the very basis for which our children can have a sense of worth and depth. And sometimes the damage is so severe that all the king horses and all the king men cannot put that child back together. It just been destroyed. So you have to be very careful about that. Destroys their feeling of enoughness. In addition to destroying the basis for their self-respect, creating them the opposite self-contempt, what are some of the other consequences you would expect to see psychologically and emotionally manifesting itself in that child who is a victim of their parents' good intention in the form of being overcritical?
They don't have any self-confidence in them. Never sure of themselves. Never sure.
Never.
Everything a big maybe.
They lack self-confidence. Will they have any courage? No courage. Any independence? Any ability to act freely on their own judgment? None. Right? They don't trust their judgment. They have no self-trust. How can they trust themselves? They have no trust in their own judgment. Because every time they use their judgment, you told them they were wrong. Every time the child decided to act on the basis of their own judgment, you came flying out of your room, right, to find something wrong with the child. And this child fails to develop fail to develop, they start feeling inadequate to cope with just the little test. I talked about the test of adult life. There's tests of teenager life. There's adolescent tests of life that the child has to be for. There's even childhood tests of life that the child himself has to have training for. Well, in the classic illustration that you will always see in any of these scenarios here, that you'll see that child. This child, for instance, can never leave their childhood. They can't even go into adolescence. You will see them pull back. You'll find they're 15, 16 years old, all their friends and playmates are 7 and 8. Because that's the only way they feel emotionally prepared and adequate to cope. You see my point? They can't even go into their adolescence, let alone into their adulthood. They're not going to make it. And you can observe it all over the place. And very often they will drop out of high school, unless, especially if there's no parent there to just, or something, right, to anchor. They'll drop out. Not because they're stupid and not because they're in a gang and all that. They'll drop out because they're totally uncomfortable with being in the company of adolescents. It's too much pressure. They're too inadequate to deal with that. So you destroy their feelings of self-respect and value in all of these things. What else do you expect to find in this child that has been a victim of their parents' good intentions in the form of being overcritical?
Negative behavior.
Yes.
Behavior.
They're going to have some powerful negative behavior.
And I think they're fearful.
Of course they're fearful. You see? They're very fearful, very apprehensive. What were you going to say? Somebody else?
They're never going to develop a real interpersonal relationship.
Thank you. They're never going to. They cannot form intimate relationships. They can't even get into an intimate relationship. You see how, again, all those tests that adult life is waiting on, right? They're going to fail at it because they don't have the foundation. And the list can be made even longer. It's the case with each of these. But I just want to get these up here so that you can get a look at them. We're running rapidly out of time here.
They got it.
The fourth is over ambition. That's a classic.
Is that right?
Oh yes. Because see, again, very often we, in the form of a good intention, saddle our children with ambitious expectations that are really our own, that we were unable to attain in our own life, right? So now my son or my daughter is going to be a doctor, right? I'm going to create all that ambition in them, right? Or they got to be number one in everything. You can't be second nowhere. Don't bring me no second nothing, right? You fill them full of nothing but ambitions, all kinds of ambition. And very often, you give them ambitions that are totally inconsistent with their talents and abilities. You're giving them the ambitions to be a great pianist. This person is so clumsy, they can't even hold a glass of water. How he's going to be a great pianist? But you putting this ambition into their head based out of your fantasy, your ego mythology, your whole effort to show up your image in the eyes of your neighbors, where you can now boast to the world, my son is a great pianist, or cello, or mathematician, or doctor, etc., etc., etc. But these ambitions that these children have been hypnotized into adopting bear very often no relationship to their innate ability, talents, predispositions, and destinies at all. The result, of course, is that they fail. They fail. They fail. They start sinking in, right? And you can almost predict the deposits now that you will find in their psychology. So, over ambitious. We have to have some ambitions, of course. This is guidance. We have to set some goals. Remember, I am not talking about the middle way. I'm talking about this extreme side called over. And we can also look and see the same kinds of damages on the underside, called hunger. You see, we have to get somewhere in the middle. And so as parents, we have to replace these good intentions that we have for our children that disguise themselves or come out in the form of this overprotective style and this over-indulgent, over-critical, or over-ambitious style. We have to replace all these good intentions with real intentions for our children. Real intentions. And to do that, we have to release our grip on our own people mythology. And we have to see our children as very different phenomena. These are human beings who have just entered into our life. Our life is like an inn, and we are innkeeper. They're only here for a while. Our task is to contribute to the earth, let them exit us en route to their own destinies. You see, you are not to interfere in their destinies. That is ugly. That is brutal. That is violent. You see, you're to assist. You see. And that's the only way to really stay conscious in that process. And remember, we don't have to get it perfect. Oh, are you perfect? Then you're not going to do anything perfect. Does that make sense to you? We just need to be good enough, folks. That's all. We need to just be good enough. So, again, these are just some quick remarks that I had for you concerning how to deal with these things.
Wait a minute. Just can you contrast each one of those right quick? The underside?
The underside, underprotected. All right? When you're underprotected of the child has no sense of security, which is one of the most fundamental needs that anybody has. The child will never feel safe. At all. You see, a lot of our children out there today are underprotected. You see, they don't feel safe nowhere. That's why schools make such a desperate attempt to create a safe environment, because for most children, that's the only place they have any sense of security and safety is at school. Because at home, they don't know what's going to go down. You see, a fist fight can break out anytime. A gun. I mean, there's been no security and safety set up in the family for this child to feel secure and safe. So on the underside of underprotected can result in those kind of things, right? Underindulgence, right? Now this child here may become a thief now. You see? And steal food, at that.
Because nothing is ever given them.
They're not given anything. You see? They form certain hardcore attitude toward the world. But if you don't never give your child anything, they're going to think you don't love me and I don't deserve nothing, therefore I have no value. Because you never gave them nothing. Nothing. And that's one of the things we have to be able to teach our children and ourselves. Two things required. One, how to receive charity. And the second is how to give it. You can't do one without one the other. You won't do either, you know, if you are in that situation. So underindulgence is very negative, you see. Now these people here will just be useless, pampered children, stuff like that. They'll probably enter into some crime, but these people become hardcore, pure torture, you know, very often. It's tricky. You have to look at each one. That's why I'm hesitant to generalize, because every human being is so unique. It's hard, you know, we can't speak on human nature like you speak on math. I can't be that absolute. And, you know, this is vague. So this is not even science here, because a human is unpredictable. You can't factor in God's grace. You don't know their destiny. You don't know any of that. So the data is very limited. So I want you to not reach hasty conclusions. I'm just trying to give you an intuitive feel for the thing. Undercritical. Now the child thinks that they have no guidance. Nothing. You see, again, there's a sense of they don't know what to do. It's again, it's a feeling of being abandoned. You know, all kinds of things can come out of that. You see, You don't know whether it's right or wrong. You don't know whether you're doing right or wrong. You fail to develop any kind of moral thing because nobody told you whether it's right or wrong or nothing. You don't know anything. And of course, under ambitious, you give them no goal. No goal means that they don't want to be nothing. They don't want to be nothing. They have no goals at all, no ambitions at all. So the underside is just as bad as the overside. We just want to stay in the middle. Just in the middle. Just in the middle. And you got more black people suffering on the underside than on the overside. Please make a note of that. Well, we ran a little long today. Hopefully next week we'll be back on pace. I didn't get a chance to get into some of the other areas, but we will definitely next week start looking at the anger, particularly in the male-female relationship. One of the things I'm going to be bringing to your attention and hopefully we'll be able to justify in that workshop is particularly in marriage. Some of the things I'm going to be suggesting to you may start here as shocking. So I want to give you a preview now so that you can get ready for it. But I'm here to tell you that in our culture, for successful marriages, probably 80% falls on the man. On the man. 80%. Strange. Strange. And so we're going to look into that. We begin to understand why so many relationships are unhappy, particularly from the female side. And for the men, I hope y'all got some men. This is the workshop, all right? If you got some sons, this is the place. This is the workshop from this point on throughout here that they need to really understand a lot of things. Simply because of the tremendous social evils that are practiced upon women. Women are denied equality in our culture. Men are raised with this artificial sense of superiority. And this carries over into a relationship. It don't stop with our politics. It carries over. And please make a note, no woman can be happy when she feels as if she is inferior. It's not possible. Not possible. The woman is bound to be unhappy. I am telling you, sisters, if you're going to marry a man, black or white, in this culture, for that matter, across the world almost now, because there seems to be no culture that is now innocent of this chauvinism. Your biggest task is that you're going to marry a chauvinist, spiritual chauvinist, and you'll have the illusion that you can be happy under those conditions. It's just that. So women starts from a very, very difficult place. So I hope that you'll try to understand, because a lot of y'all been taking it personal, as if it's a reflection on your work. Right? And we all have depression, picking. Right? Picking. And so I want to try to give you a little relief from that. Restore some of your feminine self-respect. Because then, when you fall too much in that, you start protesting the feminine in you. Because you no longer want to be a woman socially. Because they get such a bad deal. So you start protesting your own femininity and moving out. It's really something. So I want you to understand that. You see, and I want the men, if you can drag some here, they need to understand it, so that we go into that relationship aware that we have to work twice as hard as the woman in the relationship. Why? Because we got to come down out of this ego mythology of ours. Men's biggest problem is that part of our ego mythology that revolves around the chauvinism. And we have got to step down out of that stuff in order for our female, our woman, our wife to have a shot at happiness. And that's what I'd like to begin to talk a little bit about. It's a big subject. I'm not going to be able to exhaust it over the course of the balance here, but I certainly want to start this ball rolling so that you got sons, women, try to create a son that will be worthy of becoming a husband. Please don't create none more of these monsters. that is going to beat our daughters to death. Now, enough is enough. So on that note, we end, and then we're going to do some homework. We're going to do some homework. And for those of you that did some homework, I'm going to go on that side for a little bit. Please talk to me on some of the ones I've heard. Some that didn't get a chance, we're going to reverse it next week. So then we're going to start with everybody that didn't get a chance to put their homework out, because I love processing that homework. That's good stuff. Okay. Enough for today.